So I'm walking up to do the program, to tape it. We do that in the late afternoon. And I get a poll handed to me, NBC News. It's like a fair poll. Registered voters, even Democrat, Republican, Independent 16. And it's pretty good news for Donald Trump. Pretty surprising. So job approval, he's up 1 point since October. Okay, approved 44, disapproved 54. So he's actually improved with the Iranian stuff. Wow. This is interesting. Do you have a positive or negative opinion of the following people? Trump, positive 41, negative 53, 12-point difference. Kamala Harris, positive 34, negative 51, 17-point difference. Whoa, Kamala. And Gavin Newsom, who's running for president in 2028, positive only 27%, negative 45, 18% difference. So Donald Trump's people are waiting to see about this Iranian situation. And that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Okay, so the stock market opened today down 800 points. And, it goes up and it goes down. But it's lost more than 2,000 points since February 28th, the start of the Iranian conflict. Okay? So if you have stocks, hold on. Because they'll come back, but painful. Oil's the worst. So oil was $72 a barrel at the start of the Iranian conflict. It's now way above 100, about $104. Now that's a problem because it just spirals into everything. Food costs, travel costs, on and on. I'll get to that in a moment. And then inflation ignites because everybody's paying more money for the products because oil drives commerce in not only the United States, but the world. So this is the key component now in the Iraq war. The Strait of Hormuz is where the oil tankers, 20% of the world's oil comes through the Persian Gulf. They got to go through the Strait of Hormuz, which is fairly closed. So it's easy to attack it with drones, which is what Iran is doing, but they're running out of drones, I understand. And some ships are getting through. So 16 million barrels of oil a day has been held up worldwide. And that just means everybody is going to suffer, the whole world. I do believe that will unclog itself because, as I said, the Iranian munitions, their ability to attack, is declining rapidly. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth were on 60 Minutes last night. Now, some of you will remember I was not a supporter of him being appointed to that position, Secretary of War, because he's too young. And I was at Harvard talking to the students at the Kennedy School on Thursday. And Mr. Hegseth has a Harvard Kennedy School degree. He got it in 2013. Public policy. My master's degree is public administration, but it's pretty much the same thing. Hegseth is a smart guy, all right, but he's a little bit too undisciplined, in my opinion. But here, in the Iran situation, he did pretty well, I thought. And you want to be fair about it. He didn't make any major gaffes. Came across as a little cocky, and that doesn't do anybody any good. I think that's his nature. I mean, I do that, but I wouldn't do it if I were talking about war. I think you got to be very circumspect. Now, Hegseth addressed two questions by Major Garrett. You may remember that name. Major Garrett used to work at Fox News. Excellent correspondent. And CBS is working him into the big interviews because he's not an ideologue. He's not a liberal. He's neutral. I don't know what Major is, and I've known him for 30 years. I don't know what he is. But he conducted a very good interview. All right, here's the first part of it. Go.
This is war. This is conflict. This is bringing your enemy to their knees. Now, whether they will have a ceremony in Tehran Square and surrender, that's up to them.
Okay, so that's the mission, to break Iran. Now, when you use the words regime change, okay, I mean, the United States and Israel and a few others, not that many, want a different mentality running the country. So they want to be able to inspect all the nuke sites because they can't develop nuclear weapons, and get rid of all the ballistic missiles that are aimed at Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. That's what they want. And that has to happen. They will not stop until that happens. Now, there's a variety of ways to get there. You can sign a treaty. You could have new people. Persian people themselves could rise up. There's a lot of coulds. But it's going to be a different country, okay? Sooner or later, and let's hope it's sooner. All right, the second thing is about, and this is what the left-wing media is obsessed with, U.S. casualties. Go.
There will be more casualties. And no one is, I mean, especially our generation knows what it's like to see Americans come home in caskets. But that doesn't weaken us one bit. It stiffens our spine and our resolve to say this is a fight we will finish.
Okay, I don't have any problem with that. I would have a problem if infantry were put into Iran. That would not be good, based upon what happened in Iraq. So we can't do that. Afghanistan was a different situation. But there are enough militants in Iran, Revolutionary Guard types, that it's just impossible to protect Western troops. So you break them in a variety of ways, the Iranian government, but I can't imagine President Trump putting infantry in there. And I'm not going to use the word boots on the ground because that's a stupid cliche. These people are boots on the ground. Okay. We're not going to have mechanized units roll in. I'll give you an interesting aside. Last week, we edited out my analysis of the Kurds, which was reported that they were going to go in and fight on the ground. Now, the Kurds are a group of people, some of whom have descendants in Iran. Some are Turkish, some are Iraqi. It's across the board. Now, I did not believe the report because of resupply. You can't supply them. And I had that in my talking points to tell you. And then this report comes, well, the Kurds are already in there. So I didn't want to mislead anybody, so I pulled it. But it turns out I was right. And when I pulled it, I went to the producer. I went, man, I don't know about this. This does not seem right to me. Just be skeptical of what you hear. Do not believe all of this stuff. Okay. Now, back to the USA and how it is responding to Iran. So the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Charles Schumer, says we should open the oil reserves. And I had that exact thought, which frightens me because I don't want to be on the same wavelength as Schumer, who I don't respect. But that should happen. So let's put the oil reserves into the marketplace to keep a lid on the rising costs of gasoline. Okay. Now, we did some research. The Biden administration gutted the oil reserves. You remember that, to try to get inflation down. They threw everything out. They didn't have anything left. Trump has tried to replace it, but he started only in last fall and signed a bunch of contracts to replace it, the oil. So I don't know how much oil left in the reserves, but the Trump administration is trying to replace the stuff that the Biden people put out there, just so you know. All right. Finally, the president's trying to do the right thing here. This is important. The right thing is to confront Iran because Iran is a terrorist state that wants to develop a nuclear weapon. That's reality. Everybody knows that. The Iranians say that. We have a right to develop a nuclear weapon. Okay. So the right thing to do is to prevent them from doing that. Nobody knows a time frame. Nobody knows what secret labs they might have or anything like that. So Trump is trying to do the right thing for the world, not just for the United States, for the world. But sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do. Right? In your life, when my urchins come to me with a problem and it's a difficult problem, I said, well, what do you think the right thing is to do? And they'll come up with an answer, but it's always painful to do the right thing. Always. You know, in theory, it was the correct thing to try to provide a measure of freedom to the South Vietnamese. It was to protect them from totalitarianism. But it couldn't happen because of a variety of problems. But we did the right thing, and it worked in Korea, but it didn't work in Vietnam. So sometimes the right thing can't be done. The right thing is to remove Putin. He's a menace to the world. He's a murderer. He's a psychopath. But he's got nukes. And they could use them. But the people who are attacking President Trump for doing the wrong thing are lying to you. Not the wrong thing. And that's the memo. In California, I feel sorry for you guys. So the national average of gasoline in California, the Golden State, the biggest state in the country, is $5.20. National average, even after all the carnage in Iran, $3.48. Now, there's a study from the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business, which is a good school of business, says by the end of this year, you Californians are going to pay $8 a gallon for gas. Why? Because of cap and invest, which is a state law requiring oil companies to go through amazing amount of hoops to market their product because it's a polluter. So the Marshall School says, get ready in California for $8 a gallon. So you know. Joining us now from Arlington, Virginia, is E.J. Antoni, who's a senior fellow at Unleash Prosperity. That's Stephen Moore's economic group. And he's also a chief economist for the Heritage Foundation. All right, so United States Americans are going to experience economic pain, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. And thank you so much for having me. Look, the unfortunate reality here is that energy affects everything we do and everything we buy. This is part of the reason why inflation was so painful under the Biden years. It was because of their war on reliable American energy. And one of the big problems we're facing now, Bill, is that although we are using less oil in a lot of our day-to-day use, for example, millions of Americans now have electric vehicles, so they're not spending anything on gasoline. The problem is that as time has gone on, we spend much more on energy for non-energy uses. I can give you one example. American farmers buy most of their synthetic fertilizer from Europe, and that fertilizer, the primary ingredient is urea. It's derived from natural gas. So they take natural gas in a lab, they chemically alter it, and that's how you get that, again, the main ingredient for synthetic fertilizer. Well, what's going on right now with natural gas prices in Europe? They've basically doubled. That is going to impose a dramatically higher input cost on American farmers, even though domestic prices for energy have not actually moved that much since the start of this war in Iran. So
Yeah.
Again,
So it's linkage all over the place, helps Putin because Putin's got oil to sell. And there's a lot of embargo on that. So, but believe me, they'll break the embargo, the countries will, if they're desperate for oil. Food prices are the ones that Americans are complaining about the most. We can expect those food prices to rise. The question is how much, right?
Exactly, Bill. You're spot on, and I'm so glad you brought up Putin because unfortunately, this is one of the saddest things about this whole conflict right now. Putin really is the big winner because
Yeah.
he, in a lot of ways, is the marginal producer, and he's one of those. Russia's one of those nations where higher energy prices right now help, not hurt, because they are such a large net exporter. So these higher prices, unfortunately, in the short term, are literally funding his war machine against the Ukraine. And sadly, even though so many countries in Europe are giving aid to Ukraine, they are giving more to Russia in the form of those energy purchases.
And they need them. Now, the United States has an advantage because we control the Venezuelan oil content, all right? And we have a robust domestic production because that's what President Trump did when he first got in, pulled the regulations off. Do we have enough oil here to keep prices under control?
Bill, the problem is that combination. Do we have enough oil? Yes, but at what price? In other words, because look, we have rolled back a lot of Biden era regulations. That's true, but there's a long way to go. In other words, there is still such a high regulatory cost in this country that there's a lot of oil production that simply isn't profitable at 60, 80, or even $100 a barrel. But crank it up to 120, 130, and all of a sudden, all of these wells become profitable. So yes, we have enough oil, but the question is at what price? The other thing, and I'm so glad you brought up Venezuela, we do have that. One of the problems with sources like Venezuela, though, although it is a very large supply of oil, it's also the quality of oil here. Taking Iranian crude off the market is a big problem because of the high quality. Oftentimes, refiners will actually buy light sweet crude so that they can blend it with heavy sour crude to make it easier to process. So by taking the most valuable crude off the market, it hurts more than taking 2 or 3 times as much of the less valuable crude off the market.
Now, the Trump people say that when the conflict ends with Iran, that the prices will all come back down to where they were before the war. Do you believe that?
I believed it on Friday before the weekend. The reason that all changed on the weekend is because all of a sudden we saw these strikes against Iranian oil infrastructure. And then Iran returned the favor and started striking other oil infrastructure in the area. So now it's not just a matter of turning the pumps on and off, which is a multi-week process, to be clear. You don't turn on and off oil infrastructure like you do a light switch. It takes weeks or months. But now you're talking in some cases years because you have to literally rebuild what was just blown up over the weekend. So unfortunately, again, after the developments of this weekend, I'm not nearly as confident we'll be able to return Mideast oil production to where it was before the conflict.
But can't Saudi Arabia and the other Arab states fill the gap that Iran has because they are not going to be able to produce as much oil? I think OPEC could fill that gap, no?
To a certain extent, Bill, absolutely, yes. There is a lot of excess production capacity right now, and so you could fill the bulk of that missing production. Absolutely, that's a very, very good point. The question just becomes how extensive is the damage going to be before Iran cries uncle here? Look, we're basically, if you want to think of it in World War II terms, we're already in 1945. It is very clear the Allies are going to win, not the Axis. The question then becomes, can the Axis inflict enough damage that the Allies give up beforehand? And that was really the mentality that Germany and that Japan had.
Sure. That's the weapon they have now is the economy. Final question. The president is supposed to meet with Xi in China in Beijing in April. And China is dependent on Iranian oil. And they'll buy from Putin, and they'll make that up. But I expect an oil deal where our country sends oil to China. I think that's going to be part of any equation that happens over in Beijing.
Yeah, Bill, it's a great point, and it would certainly be very, very advantageous for the United States if we could start being that marginal producer instead of bad actors like Iran or like Russia. If the United States, and again, this is going to require rolling back more of those regulations, if the United States could be that marginal producer, and now we have China over a barrel, as opposed to what was the situation just a few weeks ago, where China is buying so much from Iran and buying it under the table at a discount that it really, really benefits the CCP.
But China has not said a word. So I know there's stuff in play there that we don't know about. Mr. Antoni, thanks very much. Very good interview, and I hope you'll come back. Thanks again. Final thought, I told you a few weeks ago we're going to be doing some different things here on the No Spin News, and one of them is a new podcast. Now, I hate the word podcast because everywhere I go, oh, we love your podcast. I don't do a podcast. Now I'm going to do one. I do a broadcast. This isn't a podcast. Podcast is guys in sweatshirts sitting around smoking pot, or, that's what it is. Somebody's garage. So we're going to do this differently, this podcasting. It's going to be every Thursday. It's going to have 3 days of hard news, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then a longer form on Thursday that's relevant to the news. Okay? So, first one is this coming Thursday, Rob Schneider. He's a big Trump guy, SNL alum. You've seen him with Adam Sandler in the movies. And he lets it fly about how he's been hurt in the entertainment industry and why Jimmy Kimmel's the way he is and things like that. It's very interesting. So here's a clip. Go.
My latest comedy special probably would not get on Netflix now, the stuff that I'm doing. And that's okay, because the whole landscape is shifting dramatically. Whereas, I haven't been on late night TV because if you're a conservative, it's like they are, they say we need equity and equality and diversity, but they don't want diversity of thought.
That's right.
They want diversity of look. It is a shame because it's really diminishing. Because, you need to have your certainties questioned. Your foundational thinking needs to be challenged. So make it better and to be open. And the fact that they don't have me on the late night TV is sad for them. But it affects their ratings, because I can do a tweet now and I can have millions of people see that, or put out something on X or put it on Instagram, and millions of people will see that, and maybe 150,000 people watch the late night.
Now we get into why Mr. Schneider left California. And then his interactions with very powerful people in the entertainment industry, why he likes Trump. What about, about the president had drawn him in, and all of that. So we're going to do that on Thursday, and obviously you want your feedback on this thing. So if you like it, we'll continue it. If you don't like it, then we'll go back to the old format, but I think it's worth doing. I'm not in this social media world. I don't live in this world, okay? But I see the stats, enormous interest in a longer form, getting to know certain people better. And that's what we're going to do. It's not going to go more than an hour. And for you premium and concierge members, we've got a special that nobody else will see but you guys. And I understand, because I talked to Adam Sandler on the phone before Schneider came in to do the interview, because they're best buds. And I was getting all kinds of good stuff from Sandler, but they recorded the conversation, unbeknownst to me. And we'll use a little of that for you premium and concierge members on Thursday. So finally, it's called We'll Do It Live. I hate that, because when I was 12 years old, I screamed at the television camera, "We'll do it live," with some F-bombs. Give me a break. I'm a teenager. And that is, of course, stayed there forever. So that's what the name of the podcast is, We'll Do It Live. My staff forced, I said, nah, we can't do it. No, we have to do it. All right, okay. So lots of stuff swirling, right? Thank you very much for watching and listening to the No Spin News tonight. I'm Bill O'Reilly. We'll see you tomorrow. So yesterday we analyzed the big risk President Trump is taking by participating in the action against Iran. Now, if it works out, The president will win the midterms. The Republicans will win, I believe. And remember, it's Trump on the ballot, up or down. That's what it is, okay? And if the Iran situation deteriorates or it's deemed by the American voter not worth it, then the Democrats will surge. So obviously, this is very important for our future here in the United States. And it's not just theoretical, it's real. But there is an even bigger risk on the Democratic side, and that is very rarely discussed. And that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So, like Vietnam, the Democrats have set themselves up as the anti-war party. Okay, in Vietnam, it didn't really work out for them as Richard Nixon, Republican, staunch Republican, was elected president in 1968. You remember LBJ was forced to resign because he mishandled the Vietnam War, and Nixon just trounced the Democratic opposition across the board. You might remember that 53 Democrats in the House of Representatives voted against recertifying that Iran is a terrorist state. That just happened last week. 53. And the usual radical suspects, okay? Now, this week, members of the Senate, Democratic members of the Senate, Cory Booker, Chris Murphy, Tim Kaine, Tammy Duckworth, Adam Schiff, Tommy Baldwin, all Trump haters, all right, have said, we're going to shut the Senate down unless Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth testify before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee. We're going to shut it down. That means we're not going to even consider any legislation, so nothing will get done. So it's kind of blackmail, right? No matter what the issue, they're not going to cooperate. In addition to that, a number of these same senators objected to the June bombing, June 13th, 2025, of the Iranian nuclear headquarters. Remember that? Which was successful and set back the Iranian nuke weapons program. However, there were other smaller facilities that still continue to operate, and that's what the current controversy is all about, that Iran will not let weapons inspectors in to see what they are doing. And in the last meeting, the Iranian representative actually told the Americans, hey, we're going to enrich as much uranium as we want. Too bad. I mean, that's where it was. And then the military action started. So these are the senators who, I can't name all of them, but they didn't want to, they condemned the bombing of the Iranian nuclear facility. Hirano, Hawaii, Rand Paul, he's a Republican, he's an isolationist. Bernie Sanders, Chris Van Hollen, Tim Kaine, Chuck Schumer, Alex Padilla, Adam Schiff, Chris Murphy, of course, the worst, he's the worst. Elizabeth Warren, and on and on and on. So just step back for a minute. It doesn't matter really what party you're in, whether you're conservative or liberal. These people are saying it's okay with them if Iran develops a nuclear weapon. They're fine with it. We should not intrude on that. That's how you have to analyze the news. You boil it down to really what it's about, the essence of it. So they don't want Israel, USA, any country to inhibit the Iranian pursuit of nuclear weapons. It's shocking, absolutely shocking that they would take that posture, but they have. It's on the record. So the Democratic Party then runs a risk, a huge risk, if the Republicans are smart, and this thing turns out to be a regime change, and that's what it's going to have to take, or a neutralization, complete neutralization of Iran's ability to make any weapons. Okay? Democrats are going to be in huge trouble. But right now, they are strutting around. So here is the worst Trump hater in the Senate is Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Roll him.
But anyone who is cheerleading the United States into a war with Iran has very quickly forgotten the disasters of the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, where there were early tactical successes, but it became a quagmire that ultimately got thousands of Americans killed, created new insurgencies against U.S. interests and against our allies in the region. So I do not think there's support in this country for the United States to go to war again in the Middle East.
Yeah, just sit it out no matter what happens. And of course, he's making an invalid comparison. There is no scenario for which infantry, American military, would be on the ground in Iran. That would destroy the Trump administration because Americans would not support that. And I got backup for that in a moment. Now, in the House, the leading radical is California Congressman Ro Khanna. Roll it.
It is a profoundly moral vote. It is a vote to direct our resources towards healing our own people, towards health care that saves lives, jobs that restore dignity, housing that shelters families instead of raining destruction on other nations. It is a vote to renew an America that leads once more through diplomacy, statesmanship, and principle. An America that strives to end cycles of violence rather than ignite them.
So this is the usual, I don't have any solution to Iran other than let them do what they want. Okay? But we got to do things at home. Like you can't do both? I think you can. I could. So that's just called gibberish, political gibberish. All right, summing up, big risk for President Trump. Bigger risk for the opposition Democratic Party, which once again has branded itself anti-war and would allow villains of the highest order. All right, these are villains of the highest order. All you got to do is read my book, Confronting Evil. You don't believe me? I do fact after fact after fact after fact on how bad Iran is, how many millions of people they have killed. That country has killed. And you can go back into history and every tyrant in the world. When you fail to stop the tyrants, things get worse, and that is the memo. Joining us now from Washington is the guy right in the middle of all of this. Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama is on the Armed Services Committee, which is in play right now to interview Hegseth and Rubio. So number one, have you talked to your Democratic colleagues about kind of the blackmail? We're going to shut everything down in the Senate unless you do what we want. Have you spoken to them?
Well, Bill, thanks for having me on. But for 6 years that I've been up here, from a football coach to a United States senator, I've never seen a group of people like the Democrats that hate President Trump or our country so much that they would do anything to harm our country. And again, you just had a couple of people on that I don't know where these people come from. I mean, if Donald Trump said the world was all green, they disagree with him. I mean, it just everything in the world that he does. Now, at the end of the day, on Armed Services Committee, most of us in there, including some of the Democrats, we all understand because we've been well briefed on what's going on in Iran. And it's hard to say that these people would be against it, but they listen very well. They ask great questions. And are they on the same side as President Trump? Probably not, but they understand the significance of the safety of what President Trump is trying to do and trying to take Iran down a notch before these evil people would shoot off a nuclear weapon. So it's a very interesting time up here, Bill. We're not getting anything done other than President Trump executive ordering, doing anything in terms of going after Venezuela, after Iran. I've been all for it because I've seen all the briefings, all the classified stuff. He had to do this. They had no doubt. Now, as you just said, ground troops, I don't think that's going to happen, but you never say never at the end of the day because you don't know how they're going to react along the next 3 or 4 weeks.
No, I mean, I'm not talking military strategy here. As you know, Senator, I'm talking the perception of the American people that if you did that, you would lose the country. The only Democratic senator that had spoken in favor of this action is Fetterman of Pennsylvania. While the others may be listening respectfully in your committee, and I believe you, they're afraid, I believe, to speak out and say, you know what? Based on the classified information that we've seen, this was the right tactic to take. You have to neutralize a dangerous regime like this. Why do you think they're all afraid to say that?
Well, I think they're afraid to say it because it's going to give President Trump an opportunity to have a plus on his side of the aisle. And they don't want to give President Trump credit for anything. Again,
every Democrat in the Senate that you know, there's not one or two that would say put their country first and rise above the partisan politics. Nobody?
Nope, because Chuck Schumer runs that floor with a iron stick, and they follow him like a bunch of ducks following each other in a line. Ever since I've been here, that's happened. Now Fetterman has come out because he's big for the Israelis, and that's the reason that he's on the side of President Trump on this invasion, because he understands the significance for what Iran could do to Israel if they had a nuclear weapon. That's the only way this is working out. But again, they would not vote for anything. Even if they thought it would really help the American people, the Democrats aren't going to vote against it because of the hate for Donald J. Trump.
And Schumer used to be a rational person, but now he's a 100% partisan person. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're exactly right. But they all follow Barack Hussein Obama. He's the one running the show here. And ever since I've been here,
how do you know that though? How do you know Obama's involved?
Well, just because of being up here for 4 years and seeing Joe Biden and the people that were making all the decisions for him, we knew that all the people that were making those decisions had worked for Barack Obama in his previous tenure as being president. And you can't tell me that they weren't conversing together with the people that were implanted in Joe Biden's administration. They all worked for Barack
Obama. Didn't want Iran to be empowered. He tried to make deals. They broke the deals, and Biden was ridiculous in handing over the billions of dollars that he did, and that didn't work. Okay. Now, I don't want you to give away any national security secrets, but the dissenters of this say, look, President Trump bombed Iran's nuclear facility in June. And supposedly that just set them back and wiped them out. The capacity to develop a nuclear bomb went away because of that action. Now the administration, the Trump administration, said, no, they still have a capacity to develop this bomb. Where? How did that happen? We didn't get everything?
Well, they were enriching uranium. But here's one of the reasons that President Trump went in. They were building ballistic missiles right and left. It was about nuclear weapons. It was about that, but it was also about the ballistic missiles that they were building that could reach far and near. And they were very, very accurate. And so that's one of the reasons that we win at this time. Of course, you know, you look at a situation that how weak they were. We knew they were weak. We knew they were struggling in a lot of areas. President Trump had put them in a bad situation when it come to having a lot of loyal people on the ground in Iran. He was killing his people right and left. Now we know that for a fact. Tens of thousands of people were laid down. Their life was spared because they were not loyal to Khomeini. So President Trump put all that together and said, enough's enough. We're going to do this. We're going to go in with Israel. We're going to make a statement, and they have made that statement. And again, also, there's another thing there, the oil that they have. They were giving cheap oil to China, and it's a situation like Venezuela. We cut off Venezuela, we cut off China, Iran's oil, then they have a tough time. But again, it all goes back to one thing. If it wasn't for nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, President Trump would not have done this.
All right. So the delivery system of the nukes, but right. As far as you know, and you would know, their nuclear weapons development isn't right. Imminent that they're going to have a nuke to put on the ballistic missile to fire into Tel Aviv.
Exactly. And,
okay,
and,
so it's still a ways away from that happening.
Sure.
So,
but you go in there, Bill, when they're weaker.
Okay.
Don't wait until they're stronger. Go in there when they're weak. They're as weak as they've ever been, And it was a perfect timing because they didn't think this would happen so quick after the strike back in June. So it was a perfect time to do this, well orchestrated. And again, you got to look out for the people that are also your allies. And it was about Israel also.
Okay. But it doesn't look like the Persian people are going to be able to rise up and overthrow that government. So the number we hear, and you can confirm this number if you can, is 30,000 protesters were murdered by the regime in Tehran. And now the people are frightened that they're going to be murdered. So there is no uprising in coordination with the bombing of that country. Do I have that right?
Yeah, 30,000 plus. And then, of course, you would hope that they'd have regime change of somebody that would be more of like the people that
is that possible, though, Senator? Is it possible that the people will rise up? Because that would make our lives here in America a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'd really make it a lot easier. But you never know when you do this. You go in there and you see these pictures on television. You don't know what the propaganda is. You see all these people out in the streets, and we've seen this in other countries too. They're behind the scenes telling them, you get out there with this sign, you get out there and chant this or that. You got to remember, there's 90 million people in Iran, and there's a lot of people. There's a lot of land there. It's bigger than Texas, bigger than Alaska. So there's a lot more people there than you would think. It's just the people in charge were able to pull off this, and I guess get Khomeini's son elected. But my understanding too that he's had a few health problems himself the past couple of weeks.
Well, he'll have more if they never find out where he is. How do you see this playing out? I mean, I'm not big on speculation on this program. We're fact-based, but you're a guy who has access to an awful lot of information. How do you see this playing out, keeping in mind that the American people really don't have the heart to suffer economically? I mean, we just don't. We're a soft nation. We don't want to suffer for something, 5,000 miles away. So how do you see it playing out?
Well, first of all, Bill, and you're in my lifetime, we hadn't won a lot of wars since World War II, especially ones that go longer and longer. Vietnam, for instance, we supposedly won in Iraq, but there wasn't even a fight there. We went in for false causes because of weapons of mass destruction. But that being said, President Trump's not going to be over there that long. He's not that type of person. Now, I will tell you this, and he's said this publicly, all hell's getting ready to rain on Iran the next few weeks because he wants this to end. And he's going to get it to the point where he thinks it might have a regime change or put them in a situation where they never can recoup from what we have destroyed. So, things are going to pick up. It is just that's the way it is. And again, President Trump went in there. He wasn't going in there as I will say half-ass. He's going all in. And I've talked to the Secretary of War. I've talked to General Kane. This is something that they've been planning for a while. And if they were going to do it, they were going to do it the right way. But this is not going to be a long, drawn-out war. That's not going to happen.
All right. So just summing up, there has to be some kind of change in the Iranian government in order for this to end, correct?
Well, yeah, there has to be some kind of change in direction. Again, right. What direction do you take, though? If we destroy everything that they've got in terms of military,
but you got to make sure that the tankers can go in and out. An interesting aside, China hasn't said a word about this publicly. I mean, they issued some kind of mealy-mouthed statement, but you would think they'd be more bellicose in supporting Iran. They haven't been, which tells me that they were tipped off and they don't want to disrupt the conference that begins at the end of the month when President Trump goes to Beijing. I don't know if you're aware of this, Senator, but I was in Beijing speaking to the government there in May, not on President Trump's behalf. As a journalist, they invited me. And they want to make a deal with the USA, but they're kind of just sitting this thing out, as is Putin. He's not doing anything. So Iran's pretty much alone right now. And if U.S. and Israel can basically decapitate all of their ability to wage war, I guess that would be considered a victory. Last word.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think Russia and China both are going to sit back and see how far this goes. again, President Trump wants to make a statement here. We do have to get the straits opened up for oil and gas to go in and out. That will happen in the very near future. But again, I just can't believe that this regime, after losing all their top leaders, maybe even their second team leaders, that they're not trying to make some kind of deal, because they've got a death wish here. Because President Trump is not going to stop the bombing. It's going to keep going, and they're not going to have anything to work with. You hate it for the Iranian people that want some kind of freedom, but this group continues to hang on. I think what you'll see in the very near future will open the straits up. China and Russia is not going to say a word, because when they get the straits opened up, it's going to probably help China a little bit with their oil and gas, and there'll be a little bit more calm in that area. But it all goes back to one other group, Israel. How much more do they want? Are they going to send in ground troops? We haven't talked.
They won't do that. Netanyahu will do pretty much what Trump tells him to do. Just my opinion, Senator, but I kind of know a lot about this kind of stuff. Anyway, look, keep us posted. You're a great guest, and we really appreciate you taking the time. I think you brought more clarity to this than any other person I've seen on television. So thank you very much for helping us out tonight.
Thank you.
All right, my staff that lives on social media and would commit suicide, mass suicide, if social media ever evaporated, tells me that the announcement of our new podcast, which I'm not calling a podcast, because a podcast is something where two guys sit together in a basement smoking pot. That's my image. These are really good conversations with people who are very interesting. So Rob Schneider kicks it off on Thursday. Okay, we'll drop it. And it's called We'll Do It Live. And then we have something for premium and concierge members only called Killing Time. So this is a whole bunch of stuff that nobody else will ever see, including a conversation I had with Adam Sandler on the phone, which is hysterical. So if you're not a premium or concierge member to BillO'Reilly.com, it's worth it, because we'll have this every week for you. And the episode with Schneider, I respect Schneider. And it's getting massive publicity all over the place, because Schneider knows he's talking about Jimmy Kimmel, he's talking about the entertainment industry, he's talking about how his politics and his career have been impacted by President Trump. It's really a good interview. It's the fastest, I think it was about 50 minutes, 50, you'll ever experience. So again, it's on Thursday, and we hope you check it out. And thank you for checking us out tonight. I'm Bill O'Reilly. We'll see you again tomorrow.